So my name is Brian, and I'm not going to go into the detail of asking, what you can do for me, because I'm going to show you how I've been doing this across North America, and how I make the same pitch every day, but on a pretty large scale. But essentially, you got that set up? Essentially, what I'm going to do today is take you behind the scenes. So normally I talk about how psychology can be applied to people's work across many industries. I deal with people from government, from the private sector, a lot of people from public health, from NGOs. And normally the people come out to my training are user experience professionals, graphic designers, digital marketers, product marketers, and then I have like smaller groups of people, so people working conversion rate optimization, web research, online research methods, and a few even like sort of smaller subgroups in there. And so my challenge is to make my content relevant to a large spectrum. And the way I do that is by keeping things fairly generic, and I draw examples from different places. So speaking with Matt, we talked about for the first time, I'm going to show you how I apply these principles to my own work. So this is not academic ivory tower theory. This is frontline, brutal marketing in the real world. And of course, my teaching is always grounded in the real world, but it's just, I don't know what people deal with in their particular daily business. I know from my own experience. So I'm going to take you behind the scenes. So, and I'll introduce you to myself throughout the content so that we can get going a little faster. So. This is my discount slide flipper. So this is what I put up on Meetup. So this is what we're going to go through. So how to develop an amazing training product. So the first thing is it's hard to sell seats in training that's crap. So we're going to talk about what it takes to build something that people are motivated to take, and then afterwards they find useful and they talk about it because it gave them something of value. I'll talk about customer satisfaction and how I place such a high priority on that, and how sometimes people, when they hear about what I do, they think I'm doing some sneaky, deceptive psychology, but nothing could be further from the truth. Psychology can make something good better, but it's not lipstick on pigs. So we want to make things better. So I'll talk about the credibility ladder, because that is one area of psychology where we can go back. Oh, thanks. Oh, this is great. And let's see if this works. No dice on this. Oh, you got it. Sweet. Hey, thanks a lot. Okay, so the credibility ladder. So how you can start from nothing and work your way up to having a huge amount of credibility. Talk about conversion optimization. So when you're running an online business, it's very hard to know if you're moving in the right direction just from theory and from good ideas alone. You really have to test things. So I'll talk about how I do testing, and I'll also tell you the story about expansion, of how I started with no workshops, and then I was running them across North America. And I'm still now in the midst of a training tour. So I started in Seattle and Toronto earlier this year. I was just speaking at a conference in the US, training here in Vancouver, and I'm going down the West Coast and across North America. So I'll tell you how I put all that in place. And I do eat my own dog food, so I apply everything I teach. And if I didn't, I would be very ungrounded. I would not be connected to reality. I'd be, some abstract academic talking about what should work in theory, but not having a clue what works in practice. So I do apply everything, and I'll show you how I take my own frameworks and I use them in my own marketing. So let me tell you a little bit about my workshop. This is just the homepage right now. And so this is the current tour that I'm working on. I started this roughly about 4 to 5 years ago, slowly. And so now I go through these semi-annual cycles. I do a winter, spring, and then a winter, spring, and then like fall, winter, so later on in the season. I'll normally do about 10, maybe 12 cities, and then I do corporate training as well, and I also go on a speaking circuit at the same time. This is actually an old client list, so I got too busy, and I probably have another 20 globally recognized brands. I just didn't have time to put them up. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because I've climbed the credibility ladder, and I have enough. So in fact, even though that's something that would have been extremely important, in fact, that was a top priority a few years ago. Now it's not as much of a priority because I know what resonates with the audience. So in fact, I was able to just sort of let that slide and focus on other priorities. So let me tell you about the workshop. So it's 1 to 3 days. I teach people digital psychology. Came out of my doctoral research, and I was actually studying this subject not to sell products, but because I wanted to save the world. So I started off working with grassroots nonprofit organizations in Toronto, doing environmental activism. And I started applying a process called social marketing, which is the application of commercial marketing to nonprofit and health programs. But I was doing it online, and this turned out to be a very successful combination. I had good success in the workforce. Most of my campaigns overshot by a long margin. People couldn't believe the numbers I was pulling, and then I joined the United Nations to do it. Worked with them for 7 years running global online campaigns, got bored and did a PhD, and afterwards I decided to teach people about what I had learned, and eventually I turned it into a workshop. And so I'm completely grounded in the science, but I have a lot of practical experience, and so I'm pretty good at taking a scientific paper, a theory, and saying this is how it translates in the world. Because when you go into the real world, science gives us rules of thumb and wisdom that helps us make better decisions throughout. You know, often when you're dealing with a campaign and everything, it's nice in theory, right? You know, before you start, you think you have all the answers, and then suddenly you're rolling. You're like, okay, this problem's come up. What are we going to do? Or you have simple graphic design issues of should we put this left or right, or is it up or down? Do we want this type of answer? There's so many things that hit you, and so the science helps us make a lot more guesses that are going in the right direction. They're evidence-informed judgments. When we don't know. And it also helps us to know the processes. So it's grounded in science, but very practical. And I already mentioned the people who take it. So how did I make this profitable? Well, when I started, actually, people were interested. I had an easier job with credibility because I've just been doing this for a long time, and I've stuck to my guns. In 1997, I ran my first online social change campaigns with a grassroots organization. I did another one in 1998, and then I said, you know what, I'm dedicating my career to this, and that's what I've done. I've just stuck with it. And so I banked up a lot of experience and credentials along the way. So for me, the credibility part is easier, but I'm still following what everyone else has to follow through. So that wasn't enough. I had to start training. So I ran my first pilot in Toronto, and I'll talk about that. Now it's going in about 20 to 25 cities a year, and so I'm a digital nomad. That means my life is about sitting in front of a computer in coffee shops. So it doesn't matter where I am. So I'll travel around, and I'm going to talk about some of the barriers that we face. So it was hard for me to survive just in Canada alone, because there are only a few cities really that I can go to. Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, Kitchener, maybe. I think I have to campaign for a long time to fill up Kitchener because it's so small. So I had to get into the US, and we'll talk about the challenge there. There are heavy barriers. So how do we develop an amazing product that people care about? Because you've created value, something that people want to go to and they appreciate after. So this is how I did it. And I'm sort of the internet is full of get-rich-quick schemes, right? There's always people who talk about how they made like, $1 million selling videos on Udemy or doing something, and quite often the way they did it is by making videos promising that you will also make $1 million doing the same thing, and then they show you how they did it. Because the promise of wealth is motivating, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about actually a really hard struggle. Not the myth of Sisyphus, but the pain of Sisyphus. So building something that works is a lot of work. So got no shortcuts, but I'll tell you how I did it and the things that made it easier along the way. And by using a lot of psychology and infusing into digital marketing and the research process, I've been able to go a little quicker. And so let's talk about building credentials. So the first thing, to become expert on the subject, it's not easy. It does take a long time. So if anyone wants to set up like sort of a training program, it's going to take you a while. And the way you sort of build it up is you get out there. You take every opportunity you get. You go out. You do the work. You work hard. You work around the clock. You do whatever it takes to be successful. I used to, when it comes to like campaigning work, and I've done a lot of campaigns from grassroots organizations to big ones with the UN. I've evaluated these campaigns to find out if they work, to find out if government money has been wasted or not. As a researcher and as a consultant, I go into companies to find out if they're like hitting their mark and help them to do better. But it's not easy. It is a lot of work. How you become an academic expert? Oh, same thing. Doing a PhD, and it's nice after you get the credentials and a lot of doors open for you, but the fact is you go into dire poverty. I remember when I started my doctorate, I left the United Nations. I couldn't even get a mobile phone. They didn't trust me because I didn't have this nice paycheck from a big established institution. And you end up sitting in coffee shops and writing the whole time. And how you build a reputation, again, this is like sort of hard work. So just a point here, no get-rich-quick schemes. It's a big effort. So let me tell you how I took a training program that started off as a scientific paper and turned it into a workshop that I have been invited to train at Microsoft for, at Samsung, at Salesforce. It attracted high levels of government interest. I gave training at Service Canada for teams there. I was invited to speak. I think they brought about 80 or so people from different federal ministries, including people from the Treasury Board and Privy Council. Pretty high level stuff. But it started off with a workshop. Actually, even before it was a workshop, what it was is me pounding the pavement with nothing. So what does that mean? So I have returned to Canada with a PhD and good credentials, but I had lived in Europe for 10 years, so in fact I had no relations. And my first hard lesson was that relationships matter more than credibility. And I learned that the tough way when I returned home and started trying to sell things. I was like, you know what? People don't really know me here. And I don't, I have my old friends, but they're not connected to my industry. So actually the first thing I did is, I started going out to events and I met people. And, normally the way things go, you get drunk in a bar and decide to do something. So we started meet up. I started working with people. And then I started building my networks from nothing. And a few years later, I looked at LinkedIn and they have a great network mapping tool. So I could see all my colleagues from academia and the United Nations, and people I worked with in international development. And then now my new network in the digital media space, and it was massive. And it just took me a few years of going to meetups, schmoozing, and getting drunk. And then in 2010, what I started doing is I knew my content was relevant. I knew it was very valuable because what I had done during my doctorate is I had studied the factors in behavior change that have been proven to impact behavior. And I didn't just look at things in theory and build up a shopping list and start calling it on websites saying, oh, they're using a social normative appeal or a trust appeal, so therefore that must work. Like, that would not have been cool. What I had to do is find randomized control trials that use specific psychological techniques, had measurable outcomes, so that I could use a method called statistical meta-analysis to look at multiple studies, isolate these factors, and cluster them and pool effect sizes so that I would know exactly what worked, how effective it was. When you get down to the psychology, you might ask questions like, if I make an appeal to a social norm, which means, so showing that, say, other people like something versus the credibility of the speaker, which one's more effective? Yeah, I don't know. So I knew. I had the shopping list on this. But I started talking to people about it, and they didn't seem to get me. And I didn't quite know why, because I would show them the charts and all the evidence, and I would give them big lists of academic citations. And people were, yeah, so what? So what I started doing is I started changing it up. I got the feedback, and that feedback was, Brian, you have bombed out. And you need the feedback. And that's where my feedback started. When I left the ivory tower and I started going to practitioners, they did not understand what I was talking about at all. It was a total failure. So I took the feedback and I tried again. And based on my research, I compartmentalized psychology into different areas. So what I started doing is I would go to one forum and I would talk on one area and then another on another. And what I was doing was patching out examples and case studies and visuals to show this massive study that I had spent over 2 years working on. So this was an entire year of pilot testing and using conferences and public speaking forums to fine-tune my content. I did not just dream this stuff up. This came from a big effort, and I was not charging anybody anything. I was just speaking at different workshops. So with that, I eventually got to the point where I went to one unconference, and I love unconferences. If you want to develop content and pilot test it, find an unconference. So an unconference is an open forum where anyone can get up and speak, and you give like a rough title, and people will come and they'll sit if they're interested, or they'll leave if they're not interested. So I said, I'm going to do something that as a scientist I would be embarrassed to do. I'm going to take these lofty principles and turn them into pretty pictures and visuals and examples. Like really, like no effect sizes, no charts, nothing, none of that, no real evidence even. Like I would be embarrassed if any of my academic peers, knew I was doing this sort of thing. So I did it, and what happened? Lo and behold, I packed the largest room at this one conference. It was crazy. People were like rolling in, and then they were like sitting like on the floors and like crammed up all around the seats. And there's like over 500 people in this unconference. I sort of sucked in so much of the unconference, and they loved it. I got like fan engagement, and that was a success. So it was through trial and error that I accidentally found the format, and then that became the format that I followed for pretty much everything else. So an entire year of pilot testing. So that's product development. I wouldn't even think of training anyone till I knew that people were going to like what I was offering. I couldn't think of it, but at this point, all my content was together. I had my examples, and I knew what worked. So I started with my first pilot. I didn't know what day I should put it on, so I picked a weekend and a weekday. I didn't know who my target audience was, so I had a list of about 7 groups that I thought would be interested. And because I have a background in digital marketing, having done it for many years, I booked a room, I built a landing page, I built my content, had my training materials ready, and I started marketing. And we did sort of okay. I think I gave myself about 2 months or so to fill the first workshops. In that, I found out who my target audience was, basically who's showing up. I started figuring out the messaging, and I was doing obsessive measurement, because at this point we're starting from nowhere. So a lot of the principles of engagement are based on knowing your audience. And so it's very hard to know who wants your product in the early days. You go with your best guesses, and then you refine from there. So it was only through obsessive testing. So what I used to do is I would launch very specific marketing campaigns, and I tried to hit one audience, and I would try and measure just within it so I could see what's coming back on them and see, they don't like it. And then you have to try different types of messaging. Yes?
I'm curious. I don't know if you're giving away the secret sauce here, but your retargeting is very good.
Oh, thanks.
If we're good or bad, I can't really know you're better. So just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have no idea where you're cooking me originally, but
yeah.
It's spectacular. It follows me everywhere, and I've yet to see something that's that relevant and it's good ads too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I try and be relevant, because I don't want to annoy people. Like, if something's so off base, it can really be annoying to get hit with marketing from the wrong campaign. And also the laser-focused targeting helps you learn as well, because if you're not doing it, you won't understand your metrics when they come back, because you don't know who you're targeting or whether it's working. But oh, thank you. So I figured it out from the first pilot, and I had some pretty good people come out. I tested my assumptions, I knew my audience, things were sort of roughed out. And then I spent the next few years just going across Canada doing the same thing, just sort of getting better and better. I also started teaching at York University. I used to just do a health program with them, and then it was more sort of open general outside. Now I'm going to tell you about my challenge to enter the USA, and maybe that'll go into detail after, but I finally got a 1-year visa to try out my business in America, and this was hell to get. It cost me a fortune. It was a big effort. Oh my God, you can't imagine, for a small business, this is very difficult. And I'll tell you what happened when that happened. So in 2015, we started scaling. This year, I had to get another visa. I lost 2 contracts in America because I didn't know what was up with my visa. When the client's ready to buy, but you have to say, I can't cross the border. But hopefully I will soon. Well, that's what happens. Anyway, so now I got like a 5-year, and now we're moving in, scaling in. So let me talk about customer satisfaction. So this is sort of what my workshops look like. This is in Ottawa. And I'm obsessed with keeping my customers happy, and that does many great things for my business. It keeps me, off the streets, which is nice. It helps me develop a better product. It's probably the best indicator you have of what you should be doing, who you should be targeting, how you can get better. It's a very simple thing. We just have to know, are people satisfied? And so we can do formal research. So I always do a pre-workshop needs assessment. I ask people, what do you want to learn? What do you want to get out of this? And then after, I ask them, how was it? Was it too fast? Was it too slow? Are you satisfied now? I use something called the Net Promoter Score, which is a simple question. How likely are you to refer this to a colleague or friend? No. This is, it's a common question, and you actually don't have to ask that specific question, because the Net Promoter Score it's popular because it's considered the one question you need to ask. It's the most robust across different types of industries and companies and applications. But you can also ask someone, questions about loyalty and satisfaction, and it'll give you sort of the same thing. So it's essentially going to give you a customer satisfaction metric, and that's how I use it. And so based on that, I look at my data, I stitch it all together, and I see what are the trends, and I use that to give me iterative refinement processes. But what I'm doing every single workshop is I'm listening for new ideas all the time, because in fact, some of the best ideas have come from the discussions that come up during the workshop. I'm constantly taking them into the content. I treat every workshop as an opportunity to improve. And then I also, as a principal, I teach the same content, but I always teach things in a slightly different way. I always introduce something new. I'm always changing things up, because the last thing you want to do is run out of ideas. So let me show you how some of the data looks. So I had to anonymize it just in case my information falls into enemy hands. So what this is an analysis of a net promoter score contrasted by different types of groups. So I might have user experience people in here, I might have graphic designers. So what I'm constantly doing is trying to scan for who likes and who doesn't like, because it's very hard to please everyone. If you design something that's going to be successful in the market, it's really unlikely that everyone is going to appreciate it. So you have to find your audience. And the more laser focused you can get, the less expensive it will be to market towards them and to satisfy them and to run a scalable business. And if you try to please everyone, I think you are in for a little bit of trouble. Now, I'll talk about some of the psychology. So some of the psychology on this, we talk about like sort of tailoring and personalization systems. This is when we use technology to give everyone an exact message designed for their needs. Now, you're probably not going to be able to do that. So what you're going to have to do is do market segmentation. So that we find a group of people who have a common interest, and we craft messages only for them that will resonate with them, because we're dealing with one pain point that they have or a need that they have, and we can satisfy that need. But if you go to a slightly different audience, it will be hard to meet them. So you really have to go pinpoint, laser focus. Unfortunately, on the internet, you can do this. So even if you have the smallest mom and pop shop with a very unique product, only for a very specific audience, well, fortunately in the digital age, you can now go out and deal with the long tail. So that's the part of the internet where you find people specifically interested in what you're offering. So I want to know each group and how they feel about the workshop. And so I aggregate people by promoters. Means people who said they would recommend the workshop. Passives are sort of, they probably would recommend it, but maybe not. And detractors are those who something didn't work with them. So as soon as I catch wind that one group is maybe not being satisfied, I try and figure out why. And so I found one problem. So I had a problem with product managers, product marketing managers who have experience with internet technologies and internet marketing. They love the workshop. People who are just working at a strategic level, who don't have boots on the ground experience, it really is not the right workshop for them. And so they're sometimes a little hard to aggregate in some of the online marketing channels. So I have to focus on them. And so the more you can stop marketing and targeting to people who don't want what you offer, and then focus just on those who do want it, the better you do. And actually the cheaper your advertising and outreach and marketing tactics will be. So another thing I do is I look at what it is that I'm doing in the classroom and how this helps out. So this is from an older study. So this was from 224 people, gave me evaluation feedback. And what I did is I aggregated based on the factors they liked and the factors they didn't like. And this is a nice summary. So people liked me, that was good for my ego. The exercises they mainly liked, some people didn't like them. Principles, that was mainly good. Okay, people were sitting, and the timing, I think it was like a little intense, so I had to lighten up the content. So this came from qualitative analysis. So I asked people open-ended questions to find out those who liked the workshop and those who didn't like something about the workshop. And then what I would do is I go through and put it into categories. This is a lot of work to find this out. It's like a day or so of analysis, maybe 2 days, most. But it's absolutely essential. So you can't design anything that's engaging unless you know this. And I can't say enough about doing research on what your target audience likes and needs, because you can't meet their needs otherwise. So. Another thing I do is very ethical marketing. So I have this thing, it's 100% satisfaction guarantee. This is one of the best things you can do. So I tell people, if you don't like my workshop, I'll give you your money back, and you could stay for the first day, the morning of the first day. Just give me back the books, and I'll do a refund. This is a very good thing, because what it does, it gives people confidence that they can come to the workshop and they're not at risk if it really is not for them. I obviously don't want people signing up unless they're well qualified, but at the same time, I don't want to trap anyone, and so I have this. Now, what it does for me is it says I have to have near addictive content, because I don't want anyone leaving, because often I have like a lost opportunity, especially when I have a sellout, because someone else could have been sitting in there, and now this is not good for my margins. So that means I have to have killer content, and that is why I'm obsessively listening to people. So what this does is it puts you under pressure to make sure your content is top notch, and it gives you a certain level of motivation, because if what you're putting out there in the world is not really that great, you're gonna have a lot of refunds. Also, what I do is I scan the industry. I scan all the people doing similar training, and I came out with a better cancellation policy. I give people more flexibility, so they're not really trapped. And I basically apply the principle that I don't want to be penny wise and a pound foolish. And maybe this is not so much psychology, but I do resent every single business that has trapped me into a contract I did not agree to. I remember being enraged by this one woman at a singing school in Germany who would not let me out of a contract. And to this day, I'm bitter about it. I don't want any of my customers to feel like that. I really consider it unethical.
Basically, you're just checking on how you're getting this information. You're asking them as a survey at the end, at the beginning, the middle, how is the information that they're unhappy, happy, that's what they want. I mean, listening is good.
Yeah.
You have been talking.
Yeah, so one is the needs assessment. I at the beginning, I just know their expectations and what they're looking to get out.
What they're saying to you.
Yeah, actually I have it on my sign up, so I ask them what do you want to know? So that I have coming in. And then after the workshop, this is something I know as a researcher. So it's great if you can get your data electronically. It's the best thing, it's less processing. But the problem is you're not going to get it most of the time. People, like on their mobile phones, it's a pain in the butt to write. Most people won't have the technology. So I actually use paper. And sometimes you have to use the best tool for the job. So I'll prioritize getting data over saving time for easy processing. So right at the end of my workshop, I ask people, are you willing to complete like a survey? And I also ask them if they're willing to give a testimonial. And it's so the feedback is also anonymous, because I don't want people to feel. Basically, when you do research, if you give people an anonymous environment, they're much more honest. I don't want people to be nice and polite. I actually want to know if I've screwed up. I want to know if I'm going too fast. I want to know if I'm frustrating people and something's not working. So let me talk about credibility. So I'll get a little bit more into some sort of classic psychology here. And what I'll do is I'm going to start introducing a couple of the models that I work with. So during my doctorate, I went through a massive amount of literature, and I ended up pooling together many of the taxonomies of behavior change that exist there. That meant I was looking at behavioral science, marketing communications, field called social marketing, classic persuasion literature. The behavioral science and the behavior change marketplace is actually quite eclectic. There's not one field, there's many fields. Like now we have behavioral economics. It wasn't really that popular when I was doing the research, but now it's fairly popular. Some come into vogue, some go out. And what I did is I put them into a simple communication model. And so when we're designing for our target audience, according to the model, we have to worry about ourselves, so that's us. This is also our product, our brand, our technology. People are going to engage with our brand similar to how they engage with another person, and they'll also interact with their technology a similar way. And then we have our target audience over here. So in the model, we're going to send messages to our target audience who will then give us feedback. Based on that feedback, there's things that we can do that we couldn't otherwise do if we didn't have it. So there's a whole area of persuasive psychology where our options are off the table unless we have a mechanism for getting feedback. And so I told you about some of my mechanisms for feedback, the needs assessment, the post workshop study, but also I'll talk a little bit more about this. I use my marketing to run experiments. Doing measurement while you're setting up marketing campaigns is a lot of work. It's not going to be quick. Unfortunately, it's so much work. It kept me gainfully employed for several years. But it's not a small undertaking. It's very technical, and then often, because you're dealing with multiple systems, you have to be able to reach into different data sources and pull out your information. And often, if you don't set it up right in the first place, what you get back is a mess. So you have a garbage in, garbage out problem. So normally you're going to need a hand. So if you're not doing this on your own and you need to find a marketer, you might want to try and find someone or a company that also has research experience, or go out and find someone to complement, to maybe set you up with a measurement regime so that you can come back and do periodic reporting. Because just the setup alone is a huge amount of work. We're talking many days of work to set up small campaigns. But once you have it, you can start figuring out what works, and then you can do targeted messaging and many things. So all this happens within a social and physical context, and we can also apply principles of social psychology. I'm not going to go into those right now, but this is the model. So what I'm going to talk about is this part and the audience part. That's all we're going to go over now. So let me talk about credibility. So, yes?
Yeah, if we were to Google that, would we find that model online?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so you asked if it's Googled, will we find it online? You find an old paper, well actually 2 scientific papers I wrote that use the model, and then there's a number of papers that have cited it. However, this is an update that I haven't yet published. So
it's your personal design then?
Yeah, so this model came out of my doctoral research of synthesizing systems, and then it's gone through scientific peer review a couple of times, but I've since sort of revised it and I'm looking to submit again. So. Now, this is also a model based on a study I've done, but it's been simplified a little bit. And what this is, we're looking at credibility. So to be successful online, this is something you need, source credibility. So source credibility is a quality that a person can have, and a brand can have, a company can have. And it's what makes a difference between a person, brand, or company that's trusted and one that's not trusted. One that people will act on and one that people will not act on. Now, if you have a lot of credibility, when you speak, people will believe what you say and they'll act on it. If you have no credibility, people will disregard what you say and not pay much credence to it. The irony is that if you speak nonsense and you have a lot of credibility, people will ignore you. And if you're brilliantly profound but you have no credibility, no one will take you seriously. So, credibility is something you need. Now, when it comes to designing anything online, the way you establish your credibility is by focusing mainly on these two dimensions here. So what is demonstrating your expertise? That means you have substantive domain knowledge of your subject matter, and you can show people that you understand the field, the subjects. The reason why people are going to trust you if you understand your subject is because you're probably not going to mess up out of ignorance. If you make a mistake, it will probably be because of things beyond your control, but not because of a weakness you have in your knowledge or experience. Normally, someone who's not an expert, who has a little bit of knowledge, will go in and say, oh, we had all these problems and things got difficult, right? But an expert would have actually seen them coming a long way off. They would have been used to a lot of these problems. So normally people are expert. They don't mess up because of like a small bump in the road. They're used to it. They've been around the block. Now, honesty is totally unrelated, but it's part of credibility. Honesty is integrity. It's when a company, a person, a brand acts with integrity. They do what they say they will do. They make promises and they keep them. They have like a policy and they respect it. They act in the interest of their customers, not in their own selfish, greedy interest. And so if you want to have success online, you actually have to go back and look at these principles that Aristotle spoke about, and which a lot of research still validates, and which actually after World War II was pretty much the only thing found to work in all the propaganda research they were doing. So credibility, you can't get enough of it. But once you have it, you can relax. So there are also all these superficial things that influence credibility. So when things look credible, people think they are. So actually, if you have an ugly looking site, it will not be trusted. So it will discredit you. So you have to actually look superficially like the thing you say you will. People interact with your websites and web pages like other people. So that means you can make them likable and charming. And if you really write like a friendly, nice person online, people will respond to it. And if you can show you're sort of similar to the audience, this also helps. So this is credibility, and credibility is the key to winning trust and ultimately behavior. So I'm going to talk about trust, and I'm going to show you the best model of trust I have ever discovered. So a trusting situation is one when your target audience is put into a position of risk, and they're going to take a gamble on you. Now, here's how it works. So this is your company or your website, or it's you. And a customer is being asked to depend on you because in a situation where you are now a broker and you can determine if they get the good outcome or the bad outcome. So say you're giving like advice on the stock market and you don't have the expertise. Maybe you're honest, but you don't really understand the stock market. So chances are that you're going to give some pretty bad advice, even though you're acting in the person's interest. So that's why credibility is key to trust. And we can also invert it the other way and look at a situation where someone's an expert, but they're not honest. And I hope there's no auto mechanics. No, it's fun. I have had issues with auto mechanics where I know they're certified and I know they knew what they're doing, but do I trust them? No, not at all. So I would normally read up on any like car problem, get ready and take it around because you want to have a couple of opinions. You have a situation where someone understands what they're doing, but they're not honest. So to have people trust us, we have to establish our credibility. And that's a situation where people they won't feel anxious or threatened by the situation. Because a trusting situation there's always an element of risk, and if there's no risk, you don't need to trust. Yes?
Is there a time limit on this? And like mine is like hot sauce will be where the computer is. It's a beneficial outcome. But does it have to go on? For how long does it have to go on until people say, okay, this guy's okay, or his product is okay?
Actually, I don't know the answer. I've been looking for that one for a few years, and like you always hear, you have to have 7 interactions with a person before they trust you. Yeah, if anyone has the research on that, let me know, because I haven't found it yet. But there are a couple things that do help. So just there's something called, I think it's the mere exposure effect, where just being repeatedly exposed to someone or a company or brand does help to sort of build up sort of that trust and recognition. You can also give, like if it's actually a product, giving like trials and actually having people test it out, giving them most sort of concrete experience. I think every social interaction or round of interactivity you have banks up. I don't know the magic number, but I've been looking for years. That one. So you have to worry about how you'll build your credentials. So there are different things that we can do, and online, remember, people are just landing on a web page. So how are you going to establish that you're credible? So you might have like third-party awards, show your education. If you're on the speaking circuit, people can interact with you. They can see you, or they can go on to like videos. Big name clients, having great case studies, demonstrating with user content. Any third-party endorsements are going to help. And if you have like, academic clout, like that's something that works for me, but that's not for everyone. No. I believe more people are going to judge from others rather than you. So we have to worry about the third-party stuff. So let me talk about the credibility ladder. So because I'm talking about my workshop. So I started off with the grassroots, and you don't get more grassroots than actually in the grass. Working in local Toronto nonprofit organizations doing urban forestry programs. And these were behavior change programs because what we were trying to do was get people to adopt native species trees so we could bring back the native forest and help out to fight. I don't know if you have like, is it the Norway maple? Sorry, I haven't done this in like almost 20 years, but I don't know, in Ontario we might have different like invasive species of trees and all sorts of like nasty shrubs that are destroying our waterways. So trying to get back the native. And I got a job with the UN and things went well there, and I'm climbing the credibility ladder. Now, let me talk about the ladder and what happened. So when I was doing media relations, I had to call 100 journalists to get one out. And I remember I got coverage on CTV. It was like amazing. The first time it happened, these journalists read out my press release. I was like, what? They don't even edit it? I was like, shocked. I just read it out verbatim. But the effort I put in was crazy. Now, when I joined the UN, you could break every rule of media relations. It didn't matter if you put your whatever 3 hashtags at the end and it was the right format and the hook. None of that. The media relations people in the UN break all the rules, and it doesn't matter. And they get hordes of journalists. I worked with the UN Climate Change Secretariat for 2 years. We had 750 journalists coming on average. I went to one event, 3,000 journalists came. So you just send something out and they respond. So when you're low down on the credibility ladder, you do have to work very hard. You have to struggle. And it's very hard to get people to take you seriously. And it doesn't matter the substance of what you say. Really, it is the credibility. This is a very key thing. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter the merit of what you offer. people are going to judge based on other people more than the substance of what you have to offer. Yeah.
I listened to your talk in TEDx Toronto. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about ISIS and how the campaign.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, they don't have any credibility. So how does the campaign work without any credibility?
Oh, well, credibility is in the eye of the beholder. So, like, say you're trying to establish credibility with heroin addicts versus elderly persons in a nice retirement home in Florida or something like that, right? There's going to be different types of credibility. And this is a problem, I think, with a lot of government, like, programs where they think, people trust the government, but then they try and deal with like heroin addicts, and actually, coming from the government is discrediting. You literally do need the street cred, like people who work like grassroots, like on the streets, and so one person will judge credibility that another won't, and so that's why it can vary. And so now things are easier for me. But I'm the same person. I just have more credibility. I have more of these like logos of customers I've served, and more people have like endorsed me and said, "Hey, this Ryan guy, yeah, he's got something worth saying." But I have more experience. I'm older, but I was still the same person when I was younger. And I think I have a lot of the same things that are driving me. I don't think my personality has changed that much, but I can call. I know what to expect in situations. I've been around the block a little longer, but this credibility ladder we have to climb online, and it's not an easy one. So you start up with nothing, and so at the beginning you literally have to fight tooth and nail. I'm going to tell you what it was like going into America. So because we have to establish our credibility online, and because most of it is going to come from third parties, we should ask people who've had an experience with us to share that experience. I go with complete transparency. Actually, what I put up on my website, like I said, I'm missing like 20 major brands, and I actually have something like probably about another 50 client testimonials. We had like a big delay, and then I had a bit of a meltdown in the office, and all these like logistics problems. So we haven't processed about 50 other testimonials, but it's like 100's good enough. And what I do is I don't edit them, I don't change anything on them. I put them in an alphabetical order, and maybe I'll pull out a couple of the big names, because a few small ones from big companies, they do impact more. But I want people to read what other people have said. I love to be able to say to someone, look, I have an alphabetical list of testimonials. You can Google every single person on here, probably find most of them in LinkedIn, and you can ask them about your experience. In terms of the credibility of a testimonial and star ratings, normally you don't want to cherry pick this stuff, because people will figure out that you're tampering very quickly. People are not dumb. I think attempts to do that are discovered. Because I was just given sort of the 5-minute mark, but just on that, just share what you have. People will think you're more credible if you're more honest, and the reason is that you are more credible. So, I'll just quick.
I just want to say really quick on that point. When I was at the conference over the weekend, there was a speaker there who was going on about how he was arrested for having guns, for having a drug habit. He was in jail twice. And he just went on, he had a very bad past. And he kind of started with, either you're going to love me or hate me at the end of the presentation. And at the beginning, I really didn't like him. By the end of it, I was like, this man's pretty cool, And so it was very interesting how he was so transparent, even though he was talking about all this bad stuff he was doing. And then at the end, I think half probably liked him, half probably didn't like him. So just to your point.
Yeah, authenticity will take you very far. Like, going out warts and all, I think is actually a very good strategy. You might want, you should like test things, of course, make sure it's not backfiring, but more authentic, the better, I think. So I'll talk about conversion optimization. So to manage my digital campaigns, it was getting too much. So I use Google Sites, and I built a campaign management intranet for me and a couple of staff and different contractors me out. So information about our organizations. I make how-to videos for people I bring on, so I don't have to go through like a half-hour spiel and then all like training processes. Actually, a lot of this is not psychology; it's logistics. It's like contracts and shipping things around. Do a lot of marketing, so demand generation, and that also includes content generation as part of that. Sales follows demand generation, and then we make sure our customers are always happy, and so we manage it all in one platform. The way I scale is I take multiple cities, and I have one formula that I apply to every city, and each city goes through. So this will be like a list of like 10 cities or more, and I run them through a sequence of logistical steps, marketing steps, and then student relations processes. It has to be systematic. It's not scalable. We're a fairly small team, and we operate on a fairly sort of small margins, but this is how we manage. I also run people through a behavior change outcome model that I developed where my marketing is divided up into work, and what I do is I cluster, I make people aware that I'm coming into town, and I educate them so that they have factual information about this. Normally I try and keep my ads not that engaging here, because this is just about, actually, it's going to your point, sir, on building familiarity. So in fact, actually I want uninteresting ads that people are not clicking on that much, because I have to pay for those ads. So this is only about awareness raising. Then I deal with motivation, and that's where I'll turn my ads on and I'll try and find things that people care about. And then deciding and making final decisions comes next, and that's where I use early bird deadlines and a final deadline. And this is also used to manage risk, because it's nice to do marketing for workshops, but what if no one shows up and I spent a fortune on this? So I have to deal with this. And sometimes like no one can tell me how I'm going to do in a city, because I'm rolling in. So I have my intelligence, but I use an early bird not partially for marketing, but also to manage risk. Now, so I've broken the stages down into 3 rough ones: awareness and information, motivation, intent, and then confidence and acting. And then I have a final thing for the final deadline. And these are just all of my channels that I'm rolling through according to each stage. My final stage I run is an optional stage that I play on a case-by-case basis, depending on each city. This is what my ads look like when they're structured. This is really behind the scenes. This is a little old. This one's probably about a year or so old. So I have like different ad concepts that I group under these that are designed to elicit specific outcomes. So these ones are fairly basic. I used to keep them just black and white because I didn't want people to be woken up too much and become too aware. Just, it's a very subtle level of awareness that I'm trying to achieve, and I don't want people clicking either. So, because it's a strategy of gaining familiarity. You get penalized on the ad platforms for doing this. Then I bring up content and imagery related to the workshop so that people are actually interested, say, oh, actually I'm interested. And if that works, I've made a match. And that's what good advertising should do. It shouldn't annoy people who are not interested. It should find people who are interested and pull them in, because you're offering something they care about. And then the only time I sell is just before the early bird deadline. Now, if I don't meet my quotas by the early bird deadline, I'm now at a risk decision point where I might I might have a loss. And actually, I'll even train with a minor loss. I just can't lose my shirt. So I have different strategies. Sometimes I'll decide to go forward. Other times I'll pull back. Twice I had to pull back. I pulled back in Washington and Seattle. And I write to people, I say, I'm very sorry, I'm going to refund you everything. If you want to go to the next workshop, I'll give it to you for like, a deal you can't refuse. And then I'll just try again. In Washington, they were so upset, they said, we'll host you. So that worked out well. And finally, that's how it goes. So I've edited my landing page over 1,000 times. How is that for obsessive compulsive? And the reason why I've edited 1,000 times is because I measure a lot of activity happening on my page. So I use A/B testing platforms. I do mouse tracking, heat tracking.
How do you deal with the statistical significance?
Well, when I'm in campaign mode, oh yeah, sorry, how we...
How do you deal with statistical significance?
Yeah.
Imagine you don't get a huge volume, but you get some volume, and like 1,000's a lot to go through. So
Yeah.
How do you? So let's say you get 500 visits a month, and you're doing 3 A/B tests.
Yeah.
How do you get to that statistical significance? It says, the recipe C is the most effective.
Yeah, so I don't always make changes based on A/B tests. That'll be more when I'm sort of testing something out. Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, sorry, we're probably over time. We can go a little longer, or I can sort of cut.
We can wrap it up. I try to get because people have parking meters and that.
Oh, okay.
So why don't we wrap it up in about 3 minutes or so?
Sure.
All right. Afterwards, we have more questions afterwards. We can swarm you afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
And swarm. Is that cool?
Yeah. So for A/B testing, you have to run more like fixed experiments where you send people to one variation or another. I'll use those when I have major changes, but because I deal with a niche audience, and at my peak, I get enough that I could run A/B tests, but there's easier ways to do it. So in fact, I use my ad platforms to test what works. So I'll structure ads, like I might have an ad group, these are all features, and these are all benefits, these are all value props. And I keep them systematically grouped, and you can only use things like Google AdWords, so Google and LinkedIn are good because they have good randomization. Some of the platforms have burst algorithms, so what they'll do is they'll say, more people are clicking on this ad, so we're gonna play that more and not the other one. So you get very biased results. You can wing it, like, I don't always shoot for scientific precision in the real world. Like, if I'm doing a scientifically peer-reviewed journal, yes, but for the real world, I want to go with quick iterative cycles. And if I know something biased, I'll say, okay, I know it's not perfect, but it seems to be going in this direction across multiple platforms. They're biased. Let's play this. And but the more you know, the better you will do, and you just keep refining and refining. So this is probably a good place to end. So if there's any questions after, right?